Hi everyone, it's Tamara here with another card making tutorial. This time I'm using the image that I received for participating in the first week of the Sweet November Stamps Mermaid Challenge. If you too participated in the first week, you would have received Inky in your inbox yesterday. As soon as I saw him, I knew I wanted to create a card with him blown up nice and big, just peeking out the corner of the card. I'm going to do a tutorial with some Copic colouring, plus also some ink blending and some stamping to create this very clean and simple card. So let's get started. I printed Inky out on some Copic XPress at Cardstock and just blew him up and kind of tucked him into that left-hand corner. And then I also put in a little sentiment, and I do have a little hello die that I'm going to use that will go over the top to complete that sentiment. So I've also created a mask so that I'll be doing some ink blending after we colour Inky up. I did some research online of different colours for octopus, so this is the colour that I've chosen to colour Inky up today. So I'm going to have all the colours listed in the description box below, but I'll also have them just up in the top left hand corner. So straight up I'm just going to colour his eyes, because obviously they're quite a large portion of his features and I don't like to leave them blank. So I just added some shadow down at the bottom, and then just going around that kind of like curve of his eye where it's kind of tucked in there. I've just colored that up with my C markers, C3, C1 and C00. And then just to add a little bit of shine, I'm just using B000, and that just kind of gives it that kind of bluey, kind of clear wet look that I thought would work perfectly with these gorgeous big eyes of Inky's. So I'm just only putting a small amount, so I'm leaving a lot of white space there. So just kind of swiping so that I get a nice smooth blend up into that white space. Now I've just grabbed my lightest marker, which is going to be BV13, and I'm just going to work out where my shadows are going to be. So obviously his arms or his little tentacles will throw a little bit of shadow, the base down, because obviously I'm going to have the light coming straight down from the top of the card, so like he's in some water. And I'm just going to add some around those eyes to make them very expressive, and just kind of tucked in where that kind of back of his head sits behind the front of his face. Now I'm going in with the darkest color to add my shadows, which will be V99. So I'm just kind of going over just a small amount to kind of, put him into that left-hand corner, and then at the very base is going to be where those darkest colors are, just below those eyebrows. And obviously that his big kind of lip that's kind of folded over will throw a little bit of shadow as well. My next color I'll be using is BV08. So I'm going to just go over that V99 just to kind of blend that out, and then just extend that BV08 out just that little bit further. So I'm just kind of working over that previous marker, the V99, and you can just see me just moving that a little bit further out and further along wherever I've colored that V99 marker. So just working in little flicking motions so that we get a nice smooth blend. The next color we're going to use is BV17, and again I'm just flicking up just into that white cardstock and blending out our BV08. Will be quite shadowed down the bottom there, also where this face is below. Just following where I've colored those previous shadows, just moving them out and pushing that around to blend into that middle, and coming up around those eyes to make sure they're nice and shadowed as well, so that they really stand out. I'm just flicking up and down for that little section down the bottom. The next color I'm going to bring in is BV04. I'm just going to blend that out, just leaving a small amount of white cardstock, which will be our kind of highlight area. Just pushing up the BV04, just blending that BV17 out, and just flicking that out to make sure that we've got a nice smooth blend between all of those colors, and obviously just joining up around those eyes so that we get a nice smooth blend once we add our final color in. So off camera I did just use my colorless blender, because I did do a little whoopsies up on the top corner there of his head, but you'll see later on I do cover that up because I couldn't quite get all of that purple off that white cardstock. But when I add my ink splashes later, will go over that, so you'll never even notice it. So even if sometimes you make a whoopsie like that and you can't remove it, I'm sure there's always something that you can do to cover that up later on. So I just wanted to reinforce all my shadows, so I'm going through the whole color scheme again. So I'm going in with my V99 just to reinforce where I've got those shadows around his lips, the base of his head, and those little raised eyebrows. And then we'll go in with our BV08, blending that out and up. Same with that little tentacle all the way along around that mouth, and just making sure we get a nice smooth blend, just extending this out and just working, as I said before, in those little flicking motions to get a nice smooth blend between all our colors. We'll go in now with the BV17 and just move that further along as we work into that lighter colored cardstock, flicking up with that mouth around those eyes into those eyebrows, flicking around into the top part of his head, and same with on this left side. We'll bring in our BV04, just flicking up and making sure for a nice smooth blend. We'll go up with that mouth, just moving that across, and also just around those brows again, and where that will link up with where this one goes on this side. Just make sure we link up around that eye. And then we'll bring in our final color once more, our BV13, to finish our final full blend through. So this is going to be our nice highlight color, flicking up to get our smooth blend, and the same with going around this little head, just kind of working around in the same kind of motion that his head shape is. And now we're just going to reinforce those little beauty spots on him. So I'm just putting the darkest shadow color of the V99, blend that out with the BV08, and I'll forgo the 17, but I'll just bring in our BV04 to blend those spots out. With this one, I only needed to do it the one color through. Now that all our coloring's done, I'm just going to grab out my mask and just cut around it to get that ready to go onto our cardstock to do our ink blending. So I always like to move my image rather than my scissors when I'm doing my fussy cutting. And with this one, it's got a nice black line, so it was really easy to cut around to get that beautiful, clean mask on our little Inky. And that way we'll make sure that we don't get any white halos around our image. So I'm just lining up. I always line it up with the smaller bits first and then give that a good press down before we start our ink blending. And I'll be using mustard seed and squeezed lemonade for our ink blending today, because I thought that will go really nicely with our purple Inky. So I'm using the mustard seed as my darkest color, just around that kind of outer edge where he's coming from. Blending that out, and then I'm going to lighten my hand as I come out into the white cardstock with that squeezed lemonade, so we just get a really soft finish of that yellow blending into our white cardstock. So we'll go back in and reinforce that mustard seed just around those outer edges, and then again just make sure we get a nice smooth blend between our squeezed lemonade. And I'm not using any color of this because I want that really nice soft blend out into our white cardstock. Now, to give this panel time to dry, I'm going to be actually doing my stamping with my MFT Distress Pattern stamp set. So I've grabbed out my Misty, and I'm just going to line a couple of the different splotches that are in that stamp set around Inky, so that it looks like he's got some little ink squirting out all around him as he kind of swims out to say hello. So I'm just going to add them to my Misty door. Make sure that it's in that bottom right hand corner, so if it moves I know exactly where to put it, and that way my stamping will always be in the same spots. So you can see that that moved then, and I just tuck that in the corner, use my VersaFine Onyx Black ink, re-stamp that up, and it's in exactly the same spot. So I just keep adding ink until I get the nice coverage that I want with all these ink spots. I'm happy with those smaller ones, but this bigger one just needed that little bit more, so I've given that another stamp. Now I'm just going to take off the mask and just make sure I'm happy with where all my ink splotches are with my image. I'm just being very careful with that you don't touch that ink. But I did want to add a few extra ones. So just to err on the side of caution, I'm just going to pop that mask back in place before adding some extra ink around Inky, because we don't want any ink on him. So I've grabbed out my Onyx Black ink again and just going to give this a few taps with that. And then I'm just going to add just another little splotch down the bottom. Now I didn't worry about the mask with this, but I normally should, because I do worry about getting ink. Now, just because this was missing a bit of inking because I didn't cut that out, I just use a little bit of Copic marker to color that in to match in with my ink blended background. Now I'll be using the Pink Fresh scripted greetings with the hello. It does come with some shadow portions, but I'm just going to use the actual hello die itself and cut that out 3 times with my die cutting machine onto black cardstock. So I'm just going to show you cutting out one. So I'm having a little bit of trouble, but in the end I managed to get that out, and we'll just pop those little inserts of the O and the E out. And this is the beautiful little hello that you get from that set. So as I said, I've cut the other 2 off camera, and I'm just going to now stack these up so we get a little bit of dimension in that hello sentiment. So I'm just using my precision glue tool, and then I'm just going to line up one of the hellos over the top, just trying to make sure that it is all lined up. So having that glue gives you a bit of wiggle room to get these all in a line. And I did the final one off camera, and now I'm just using my reversible tweezers and my precision glue tool to get some ink on the back of those 3 stacked hellos, and we'll get that to the front of our card. So I'm just lining that up, making sure that that's straight all the way along, making sure those L's are upright and that O's not being pushed up too much. And once I'm happy with that, I'll set that under a hard base to dry. Now I've already cut and scored a landscape card base, put some glue on the back of our panel and got that stuck onto our card. And this is the finished card for this tutorial. Inky's so gorgeous, and being a digi stamp, I just love being able to just create a little bit of cropping and really enlarging him to make him pop out with those huge eyes to look at you and say hello. I hope you've enjoyed this card making tutorial. If you have, please hit the like button, and if you'd like to see any future videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.